that's awesome. Okay, so my name is Nikki Harkin, and I actually teach at the University of Northern Iowa, which is why I'm a little bit late, because I had a class until 12:15, and then of course I had to walk my car, right, and jump in and get here in time. So I actually teach in the Department of Communication Studies. So I teach speech, I teach about relationships, I teach writing, which actually has very little to do with what I'm doing today for all of you. Well, actually it has some. I have background in research and all kinds of other stuff. So, but one of the reasons that Mrs. Hoyer asked me to come today is because of my son. My son Tucker is 12, he's in 7th grade, and he is on the autism spectrum. And he's very unique, and the way that we sort of know each other, Jack is your cousin, right? Is that she has a cousin whose name is Jack, and Jack's mom and I are friends. So that's kind of how we made our first contact. And Jack and Tucker are very much alike in the fact that they are on the spectrum, but you would never know it. Okay, so autism has changed a lot in the past 10 years. What year did you graduate from college?
I was finished in 04.
Okay. So probably even in your elementary years, much like mine, the only thing about autism that we knew was probably kids in the corner who rocked back and forth, or who did a lot of flapping, right? Or they couldn't really verbalize words and language. So they may have made weird noises, right? So they were those kids, right? And so they would go off to, of course, special ed classrooms. Well, what's happened in the years since then is there's been a lot of research on autism. How many of you know how common it is now? Many of you know? No? Okay. The last statistics I read was 1 in 50, I think it's 1 in 58 children will be identified on the spectrum. The other thing that's changed is, how many of you, have you ever heard of Asperger's syndrome? Yeah? Do you know what it is?
Well, my mom was there.
Yes!
The kid on there, he has Asperger's.
Right.
And he just, he's really intelligent.
Uh-huh.
He just, certain things have to go the way that they were planned, or it's really the opposite.
Yep, absolutely. How many of you watch Parenthood? Okay, all right. So yeah, it's a great example, okay? Asperger's is actually now, they're trying to actually take away the name Asperger's and just call it autism. And we talk about this autism spectrum. So you hear the word ASD, which is autism spectrum disorders, okay? So we have sort of on this end, those kids who still do maybe rock in the corner, who are very nonverbal, who it's difficult to communicate with, who you worry sort of about what will happen to them when they're 30 and 40, okay? And then we have on this other end, what we would call sensory dysfunction, okay? So, and actually my son is very high functioning. He would argue that we're all autistic, all of us, okay? And in some ways he's right, okay? Because on this end we have a sensory dysfunction, and that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. Some of the first trigger things that you will see in children when you work with them or teach them, that you will find like, oh wait. Now as I go through this presentation, the other thing that you're going to find out is you're going to see a lot of yourselves, probably at some point or another, okay? The difference is this, right? That we all may have these things that bother us, these things that happen, but most of us can continue living. Okay, so for instance, if I have a tag that's bothering me in my shirt, right, it's going to bug me for 5 or 10 minutes, right? If Tucker has a tag in his shirt, he will be obnoxious all day long, okay? And he won't be able to learn, eat, rest. He won't be able to do anything because the tag is bothering him, okay? And that's the big difference, all right, is that some of us have the ability to kind of leave those things alone and try to forget about them, and others of us don't, okay? So that's the big difference. So today what I'm going to do is we're going to take you through this Prezi first, and then I'm going to show you a little experiment here that will really help you to understand why it is that these children, and probably some of your classmates, we were just saying 2 days ago, I had one of my college students that I had probably 3 years ago contact me, and she said, I really need some help. I am in a bind, right? And she's like 26, okay? And so she's like, can I have your phone number? So she calls me, and I said, what is going on? She said, oh, I'm on my way home, to her hometown, which is in western Iowa. And she works in Waterloo. I said, what's going on? Are you okay? Are your parents okay? What's going on? And she said, my she's 25, so her twin brother is 25. She said, they think he's autistic. And I said, oh, really? And she said, yeah, they think they misdiagnosed his ADHD and his ADD however many years ago, and now they're finding that there may be more to the story. And I need to talk through this. And as soon as she started talking, I was like, oh, yes, probably. And part of that reason is because 15 years ago we didn't know as much about spectrum. We didn't know as much about autism. So now we do, and so there's some arguments that is autism really on the rise, or are we just getting better at understanding what the stuff is, okay? And that would partially be my argument. I think there's some rise, but not as much. So the first question of the day is, how many senses do we have? Wrong. We have 7. I know, shocking, right? They teach you all through, right? I didn't know any of this until I started researching for my son Tucker, okay? So we have what? Sight, touch, smell, taste,
Here.
right, sound, okay? Those 5 senses. We also have 2 other ones. One is called the vestibular sense, and the other is called the proprioceptive sense, okay? Now, there's some that think we even have 8, and it's called the interoceptive sense, and I'll talk a little bit about that. That is not on this presentation because there's still a little bit of argument of whether that really counts. Knowing Tucker, I would tell you that it counts, okay, but it may not. All right, so first we have, what do we have? Are you going to move that for me?
Well, I have a clicker up there.
Oh,
Are we
where's
playing
that?
the video
Oh, right here.
first?
No, we're going to
Okay, so why don't you try your clicker and see if it goes where you want it to.
How do I
Just point at the TV.
Point it at the TV?
That's not working. Okay.
Do I have to push this one?
Is it on? Get on the side. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
No, it's not working. Okay, so I will have to do it. Come on.
There we go. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about each of these senses, okay? And then what we refer to as something being over and under. Some people call it avoiding and seeking, right? There are a lot hyper and hypo. So there are lots of different words that we use to talk about these different types of sense issues that we have. So the first thing, of course, is we're going to talk about sight. Our sight helps us to define objects, peoples, colors, and space. You all know that. We use our eyes. We see things, okay? Well, there are some people who... Oh, now she's adjusting. You're okay. You're okay. So there are some folks, especially when we talk about spectrum, who are hypersensitive, okay? And what that means is that lights appear, they jump around, images can become fragmented for them, and so what ends up happening is it's easier to focus on a detail rather than the whole object itself, okay? Now, a great example that I would give you is one of the very first moments that I knew something was funky with my Tucker. Something was definitely funky, okay? And I had a background in education. I was a K-12 education major actually before I went back to school and started teaching at UNI. So, you know, my little one is 3, and we sat down to do a puzzle. Okay? So tell me, how do you start the process of completing a puzzle?
You go around the corners.
Right? We find all the edge pieces. Okay? So we sit down, and it's a Scooby-Doo puzzle, and I said, okay, Tucker, let's find the edge pieces, right? And I run my finger, I'm like, this is what they look like. They have a flat side. He starts screaming at me, okay? But keep in mind, his language was also slow to develop, which is a huge indicator, okay? Now, he would talk when he really wanted to or needed to, but he was not about having conversations, which is bizarre because I talk all the time, okay? So I'm trying to get him to do this. He refuses, okay? So finally I thought, okay, fine. You do it yourself. So he looks at the box, and he then puts together the Mystery Machine, and Scooby-Doo, and Shaggy, and Daphne, and Velma, and Freddy. He puts all the pieces together, and then he slides them together. He dumps out the edge pieces, he looks at them, and then he places them one by one all the way around. Okay, that was the first time I knew. I was like, that's not normal, right? Like, I'm not a huge fan of what's normal and not, but that thing that just happened, there's something very different. And part of that is this very idea right here, that it was easier for him to focus on a detail rather than the big picture was overwhelming, right? He's looking at the box in the picture, right? And we're all a little bit like this when you go to solve a puzzle. Don't you pick something out, right, to start to focus on, right? Okay, so that's being hypersensitive. On the other side of that, we have hyposensitive. And what that means is that objects can appear dark, your vision is blurry, very, very poor depth perception. Very poor depth perception. In fact, I think that I have this, right? This is where I fit in. I am so clumsy, right? It's ridiculous. How many of you do curb checks all the time in your vehicles? Yeah, right? Okay, that's this. We have a problem here, okay? And that we are hyposensitive to visual elements, all right? Like, I can't gauge how far I need to turn to miss the curb. I can't. Like, my senses won't let me.
Like my tires are like getting like stuff rubbed off the sides of them.
Right.
Because I hit stuff.
Right, exactly. And part of that is this business, right? It doesn't mean that we have autism, but we're on the spectrum. There's no doubt about it. So we have very, very poor depth perception. I still like, and Tucker is very athletic. He's a very big boy, and I'll talk about that in a second, how that kind of adds to a lot of the stuff he's already has going on. But like, he'll throw a ball at me, and I have no idea. Like, I can't judge where it's coming at or coming from, okay? So part of this, it's funny stuff, because I always just thought, oh, that's just because I'm bad at catching. Well, yes, but it actually is this, right? This part of my sensory development didn't happen for some reason, okay? And I actually joke with Tucker. He loves football, okay? And he's in 7th grade. He is almost 6'1". I know, it's hilarious. Like 210 pounds, and he's 12, okay? So he's this ginormous boy, and can catch anything and everything that comes his way. And I've always said to him that he can do that because his mom has been playing catch with him his whole life. His dad wasn't around a whole lot, and then I remarried to my current husband. But I said, you know, Tucker, if someday you go to the NFL, you have me to thank, right? Your hands can catch everything because your mom has no sense of where things should go, right? So that's hyposensitive. All right, the next thing is what we've heard, obviously sound, what do we hear? And this one, I can tell you right now, is huge, 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 okay? And probably also for some of you, okay? So we can first be, what comes up first, hyper or hypo? Hyposensitive. So we may have hearing loss. People may not acknowledge particular sounds. Okay, so you kind of can't recognize where they're from. They might enjoy really crowded or noisy places. Kids are like this, okay? A lot of children, they'll bang, right? Bang pots, yeah? Sound familiar? Any of you babysit? How noisy kids are? They're banging pots and they're banging doors and you're like, wah! Okay? Part of this is this hyposensitivity, okay? So what they're trying to do is they're sort of trying to ramp up their ability to process that information. Okay? So like if I go quietly, they can't really, it's not discriminatory, they can't really understand what's happening, right? Which is why they want it loud, right? Then they can take that in, all right? The opposite side of that is probably where many of you, I know I sit on the spectrum, and so does my Tucker. Noises are magnified, distorted. He's particularly sensitive to sound. He can't cut out background noises, okay? Excuse me. This is, again, one of those moments that you can really tell that there's something going on, okay? Number one, you cannot yell at Tucker. You can't, okay? Because he is so sensitive to sound that he will literally freak out. Literally. Not so much anymore, but when he was like 5, like if my mom would yell at him, because she's a yeller, he would melt into a puddle of tears on the ground. I mean, absolutely just melt. He would, he'd either do that or he'd scream back, okay, and not really know what he was screaming or screaming about, okay. He doesn't like loud noises. Anything that's loud is scary to him. We can barely go watch movies because anything that's sharp or loud is really scary to him. Great example, how many of you have seen, what's the movie? Will Smith and they fight aliens, Men in Black, right? How many of you have seen Men in Black? Right, there's an opening scene where they're at the farm, remember, and then there's like this big gaping hole, and then the alien pops out of the hole, okay, and it's really quiet, right, because it's on a farm until that. And when we were watching it this spring, I'm like, oh, Tucker, you'll love this movie, it's full of action, right, because he likes the Avengers, right, so we were betting on that, and the second that happened, because the movie was quiet, and all of a sudden was super loud, he literally like started screaming, ran up the stairs of our house, ran into the furthest bedroom, to the furthest corner, and hid under a blanket. Okay, and he's in 6th grade. Right, so that sound was so scary to him, and triggered his sound so harshly. Okay, okay, that he had that reaction. He also has difficulty cutting out background noises, okay? So like right now, how many of you have ever taken a test and you get really distracted by a fan, by somebody tapping a pencil, right? Noise in the hallway, right? Okay, does that sound familiar? That's a spectrum thing, okay? Except that people on the spectrum, they can't focus at all. Like you may have troubles focusing in that moment, but they then become so overwhelmed by that, right? They become so overwhelmed by that noise that they can barely even function, all right? So that's the big difference there. Okay, then we have, comes next, touch, okay? Touch is pretty important. You know, of course, how we feel pain is also involved in touch, and how we like to be touched. So we have, again, the over and the under, the hyper and the hypersensitive. And the thing is children on the spectrum can actually be both, okay? The deal is they can't regulate it. That's where the problem comes in. So what they're trying to do is sort of get back to this balance, but they can't because they're over here all the time, sort of like a big teeter-totter, okay? So people are hypersensitive, and you may be this as well. How many of you hate wearing shoes and socks? Anybody? Probably hypersensitive. How many of you hate wearing jeans? Anybody hate wearing jeans? Right? Hypersensitive, okay? Tucker won't, he has one pair of jeans. I think he's been in jeans less than 10 times in his life, okay? He doesn't like the way they feel. He doesn't like the way that they touch him, okay? So he's a swishy pant guy. He has difficulty oftentimes brushing or washing hair, and even teeth, right? Every morning it's a struggle to get him to brush his teeth because he doesn't like how that feels in his mouth. Okay, hair is the same thing. Certain types of clothing, certain textures. Again, we have the tags is really important here. How many of you did tags drive anybody crazy? Right, okay. They itch, right? Or then you have an itch and you can't stop, right? Okay, this is all part of this being hypersensitive. Tucker actually, if you know, do any of you know a child that has autism that's on the spectrum? Okay, and some of this is probably sounding pretty familiar then, yes? Yeah, okay. Like he couldn't even wear, we'd have to turn his socks inside out because the seam on the top of his socks would drive him crazy, like to the point where he'd be kicking off his shoes during school. So we finally figured out, okay, if we turn the socks inside out, it was the easy way for us to not have, that he didn't have to deal with that seam, okay? All right, next we have, hyposensitive, loves to be held in tightly, high pain threshold, okay, enjoys heavy objects on top of them. Ooh, why do you say ooh? Does that sound like you? Yeah, okay. Do you, like when you go to bed, do you like more blankets and more blankets and more blankets? Yep.
I like 5 or 6 of them on my bed.
Yep, that's a perfect example,
Like
okay?
during summer too, like during the summer, blankets all over.
Yep, great example. How many of you, for instance, maybe even when you get into bed, you'll wrap your blankets really tightly around you, right, like a taco, okay? Good. And this is another great example of being hyposensitive. Tucker very much has all of these things, okay, in that he's a blanket guy. And even, like if he gets really uncomfortable in an environment, there's actually these things called weighted blankets. Have you ever seen them or heard of them? Okay, they're actually blankets that weigh like 20 or 30 pounds. Okay, so when he was in kindergarten and he'd take naps, they'd lay him down and then put a weighted blanket on top of him to get him to calm down enough to actually rest, because otherwise he was, you know, just kind of all over the place. And we notice that now. Like we were at my mom and dad's house probably about a month ago, and he was real antsy, okay, because he was in a different environment. He wasn't in his home. You know, his schedule was all messed up, and he laid down on the floor, and he just all of a sudden was like, "Mom, I need another blanket, and another one, and another one," right? So I had literally almost all of my mom's blankets in her house piled on top of him, right? And I'm like, "Are you hot yet?" And he's like, "No, it feels so good." Then I went out to my husband and I was like, "Will you go lay on Tucker?" And he was like, "Yep," because he knew exactly what Tuck needed, right? He needed that weight and that compression on top of him to be wrapped up super tight, okay? So how many of you think that is a reminder of who you are? Yeah, good, okay. All right, next, taste. Taste is interesting. All right, same thing that we have here, the hyper and the hypo. Hypo likes spicy food, lots of flavors. These kids will eat about anything, okay? Tucker will eat a jar of salsa at a time, one sitting, whole jar, right? Eats on everything, except cereal. He has not had it on cereal yet, or ice cream, okay? But he will dip his ham sandwiches in ice cream, or in salsa, which I think is disgusting, but whatever. He dips his sandwiches in salsa. He dips chips in salsa. Not just like corn chips, but like potato chips, Doritos, anything that can be dipped in there. He's been known to dip cucumbers into salsa, which just about makes me gag, but whatever. And part of that is that it's spicy, so he can taste it. Okay? So the foods taste really bland to him. All right. So what happens then is he has to eat spicier things so that he can actually activate those taste buds. Okay. On the other side of hyposensitive, we have the hypersensitive, and he's also some of that. Okay. He doesn't find foods too overpowering. Well, the smells of foods he does, like onions. If I'm cooking onions in my house, right? I have to open the windows. Because otherwise, and he's so dramatic about it. He's like, oh my gosh, what's that smell? It's horrible, right? You're just like, dude, it's just onions. You've smelled them how many times in your life, and you still can't come to terms with it, okay? But texture is a huge issue for him. How many of you know that you have food texture issues? What can't you eat?
Well, like when I was younger, I couldn't eat like mashed potatoes, bananas, and like now I can't eat like chicken and noodles because the noodle and the chicken, they just don't go well together.
Okay, good. That's a great example. He's had mashed potatoes one time in his life, right? And he kind of did this kind of thing like you gay. Okay, good. What were you gonna say?
I don't like anything mushy and chunky together. Like I don't like applesauce or like pudding or yogurt or oatmeal.
Cottage cheese probably puts you over the edge.
Yeah, I just don't like chunky mixed with like,
Okay, good.
I don't know.
I can't have like the hard-boiled eggs where you split in half, the deviled eggs.
The deviled
like
eggs,
that.
the mush.
Yeah. And it can be mashed potatoes or
Good.
cottage cheese or.
That's a great example.
I don't like crunchy things added to my sandwiches like onions or peppers.
Okay, good. That'd be all mush.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Anybody else? All right, good. And these are all Tucker's things. Like he can't do mushy things. He can handle pudding, but like he can't handle he doesn't eat any cooked vegetables at all. He eats all of his vegetables raw. He eats vegetables every day. He eats cucumbers, carrots, celery. He eats pea pods. He'll eat green beans raw, right out of the garden. He'll eat peas, out of the pea pods, out of the garden. But the child will not eat, he'll eat raw tomatoes, like an apple, right? He'll grab a tomato out of the garden and just eat it. But if the tomato is cooked, no way, man, unless it's in salsa. Somehow we get away with that. I'm not sure why, okay? The taste evidently supersedes the mush factor, all right? So, but that's obviously a huge piece of it. Okay, next we have smell, of course, and smell is pretty huge. Hyposensitive, some people have no sense of smell, okay, and they often fail to smell things, obviously, and part of that is even their own bodies. Okay, so sometimes you'll say to somebody, man, they smell so bad they can't even tell. This is probably one of their issues. Okay, is that this part of their sense hasn't developed. Okay. Some people even lick things. You may have heard of kids eating bleach. Not bleach, but eating the laundry detergent or dirt. Have any of you heard of those? Yeah. And that's part of this, right? Is they can't smell it. So what they're trying to do is that they're trying to eat it to try to figure out what it smells like, right? I mean, have you had something to eat and then you're like, oh, that smells like a store that it may have come from, right? That you can tell right away. So that's what they're trying to do when they can't smell the laundry detergent. It doesn't have a strong enough odor, so they may eat it to try to get that taste, which is, of course, incredibly dangerous, all right? We've never had to battle that, but I do know families that have. Hypersensitive, intense and overpowering perfume. I don't wear perfume because Tucker would go bananas. Okay, he can't stand the smell of onions being cooked in our house. Okay, he's so hypersensitive to smells. I actually am too. I can barely walk into Victoria's Secret. Okay, because I'm like, right, and it's not an allergy thing. It's leave me alone with your bottles of spray, ladies, right? And sort of most department stores, when I walk through that perfume section, I just can barely handle it. And like I said, it's not an allergy thing. It just, I'm so overwhelmed by all the smell that I can barely function. Okay, next we have vestibular. Here we go, the 2 new senses that you didn't know existed. Vestibular I get really excited about because when I was doing all this research and trying to figure out what was up with my kid, and I saw this, I finally had a whole lot of meaning. Right? Oh, he's not a freak. I mean, he kind of is, but he's not, right? I mean, he's got some legitimate stuff going on. And so much of this was vestibular, okay, that are his issues. vestibular is actually what helps us understand and maintain our balance and posture. It's in our ears, right? If you ever had an ear infection and you were dizzy, or you were unbalanced, right? That's your vestibular sense. It's a sense of where we are in space, okay? And two very important things, right? Hyposensitive. This goes back to the original diagnoses of autism, right? Kids who rock back and forth, right? For those of you who know children on the spectrum, do you have rockers? No? Clappers? Yeah? What kind of repetitive motion do they do? Do you know?
Not really. They just usually either they do like the hand thing and then they go like this and they just rock like this.
Yep. Okay. And high functioning, pretty high functioning or not? Would you say?
Not really.
Moderate, maybe? Okay. Like Tucker, okay, he used to rock a lot, like when he was little. Okay, and rocking, for those of you who don't know, it's actually called stimming. That's the real word for it, is that they stim.
Does that mean like they can't sit still either? Like they always have to be like moving?
Always moving. Always moving, right? Tucker is an always moving kid. Always throwing, he's got a football in his hands all the time. Always throwing a football, right? Okay, and part of that is that their bodies can't seem to just be at rest. So to get their senses heightened, they continue to move. Gotta move.
Same with my sister. When we sit down to eat supper, she always has to stand up and walk around. Like she can't just sit down and eat.
Yeah. And part of that is this vestibular sense, right? That she's trying to get that organized. So the rocking thing I think is really interesting though, because Tucker, he would rock, not terribly, but he doesn't as much anymore until there's something wrong in his environment. Okay? And they call this stimming because it's also referred to as a self-soothing behavior. So if I'm in an uncomfortable spot, rocking is something that I can control, is something that I know I can do. It helps me relax. What do we do to babies to relax them? We rock them, right? Repetitive motion. Okay? It's the reason that we have so many autistic children like water. It's calming. It's repetitive. They like to sit beside oceans and lakes and watch the tide in and out, right? It's this repetitive motion. And so Tucker doesn't rock a whole lot anymore unless he's tired or something's not right in his environment, right? And then he'll start that because he knows, like, okay, I can soothe myself. It's gonna be okay. I know it's gonna be all right, right? So I often think about it as, yeah, it's something he has to do, but it kind of takes him back to his infancy. You know, when my mom is rocking me, I know everything is okay. So that's where I go back to, right? And part of that is me just trying to take a positive angle on my kid standing in church going like this, okay? All right, next we have hypersensitive, okay? Difficulties with sports where movement needs to be controlled, stopping quickly. Oftentimes, car sickness is huge for the vestibular sense, okay? That you kind of can't tell that you're moving and you need to have that movement and you don't really know what's happening. And there's too much movement to concentrate. A great example of Tucker and his hypersensitivity is that he hates escalators, always has. Okay, there are several things going on. First of all, the movement that he can't control. Okay, second, his feet are off the ground, and anytime his feet are off the ground, he freaks out. Okay, it's because he can't tell where he is located in space. All right. So that's vestibular. And last, we should have, I think, proprioceptive. Yep. And this, between vestibular and proprioceptive, again, I got really excited because I was like, oh, my kid's not just weird. There's actually something going on with him. The proprioceptive I really, really appreciate. And you're going to find out why in a second. First of all, they're hyposensitive. And this is, Tucker actually has both angles, which makes it incredibly difficult because we're constantly trying to balance that teeter-totter of where he is, okay? So this first is that he bumps into things all the time. He cannot judge or has difficulty judging personal space types of issues, okay? So one of the first things that, we worked with an occupational therapist. Anybody know what that is? Okay, yeah, kind of, a little bit? All right. Is that what you want to be? Okay, good. So our OT said, well, what he's experiencing is he's having troubles getting grounded, right? And I was like, what are you talking about? Okay, come here for a second. Just stand up. Okay, so what was happening? So what was happening is that Tucker couldn't tell where his body was in space. right? Because there's so much space all around. I'm going to try not to smack him. Okay? There's so much space all around us. And his body, a human body is like electricity. Okay? So some of us can figure out exactly where we are, and some of us can't. So what Tucker would constantly do is be like this. Okay? Why? What happens to electricity when it touches something? It gets grounded. Okay? Thank you. So what would happen is Tucker would be getting wild. Okay? A lot of that would be because he couldn't figure out where he was. So all you'd have to do is just go put your hands on him and he would immediately calm. Okay? And part of that was he couldn't tell where he was in space. He still will hold my hand, you know, when we go places, or he's somewhere that's really, really nervous for him. A couple weeks ago we went on a hay rack ride. And it's a little bit of a funny story because a lot of kids on the spectrum have a lot of questions. If you've ever worked with them. Look at your teacher laughing because she knows Jack. Question after question, right? Mom, tell me about this hay rack ride. Well, here's what's going to happen. What if I fall out? You won't fall out. Well, how do you know I won't fall out? Well, you won't fall out because there's actually protective things around the hay rack ride. Well, what's the space like between them? I mean, what if I fall out in between them? You're not going to fall out, Tucker. Well, what am I going to sit on? Well, there's going to be hay bales. Well, are they going to be itchy? Well, yes. So remember to take a blanket. Well, what if somebody's allergic to the hay? Isn't that going to be, right? Like, it is question after question after question after question, okay? And part of this is that when we went on the hay rack ride, he held my hand. Half of the way, half of the time. A full, probably 45 minutes. Didn't let go. And part of this was groundedness. Like, I am so nervous right now, and I can't tell where my body is in space, and I'm in this new environment, so I've got to ground myself. I've got to know that I'm with someone that I can trust and someone that cares about me. Okay? And then we have the hypersensitive. Again, difficulty with fine motor skills, buttons, shoelaces, pencils, okay? This is actually where our OT came in and did amazing, amazing things that I had never seen before. So, for instance, Tucker had troubles writing his name, okay? And so she explained to me, she said, here's why his fine motor skills haven't developed like they should have. And so she said, what we're going to do is we're going to do two things. The first thing we're going to do is do you have an end table at your house? I said, well, yeah. She said, I want you to put a piece of paper underneath it, tape it to the underside, throw a blank over it, and make a pen, right? It's fork time, right? Everybody, all kids like forks, right? Yes? Yes, you probably would still book forks. Yes? Okay. So she said, then put Tucker under there with a short pencil or crayon, marker, whatever, tell him to draw. You don't care what he draws, just have him do that. And I was like, okay, why? And she said, well, one of the things that's happened is because his fine motor skills haven't developed, either has the muscle control in his hand. Okay? So putting him upside down and making him draw upside down, the gravity will force the writing utensil out of his hand, so he'll have to work harder to hold on to it, which increases his hand strength. I was like, you're a genius! You're a genius, right? I mean, that was amazing. Okay, so we did that for a while. And then the next thing she said, okay, now we're going to take a clipboard. Okay, we're going to Pringles can, put it at the end of that clipboard. And we're going to have him write on that all the time. Okay, and I was like, what? Okay, so obviously, right, Pringles can, clipboard. Right? I'm like, why are we doing this? Okay, she said, well, because, again, the fine motor skills. So what was happening is while he was writing like he was on a board, right? So he's writing he's trying to use his whole arm, okay? As opposed to when we write on a piece of paper, we just use our hand. Does that make sense? Right? This versus this. He hadn't mastered this. So what she did with this Pringles can is because then it was at an angle, if he tried to use his whole arm, what would happen? He'd hit it on the ground constantly, or on the table, right? So it forced him to only write with his hand, right? And that's part of this hypersensitivity. And one of the best things that we know about children on the spectrum is that if you catch it, right? If you catch it fast, you catch it early, that there are so many things that we can do, right? To help them try to balance these sense issues, to deal with social issues, right? That we can teach them all kinds of stuff. Now it takes a lot of patience and a lot of time, but we know that we can help, okay? So we have hypersensitive. Then we have, we're not going to watch that yet, okay? We're going to do a little experiment. So what I have here, first I'm going to take this out, and then we'll put it back in. Okay. So what I have here are 7 7 glasses of water, all colored. What do you think those all represent? Right, the 7 senses, okay? So here you all are watching this presentation. What we would call you is a neurotypical, okay? Which means that your brain, it just works, okay? It doesn't really struggle at all, okay? So we have up here, let's say this is your brain, this colander, okay? This is your brain. And we have to filter things out all day long that we experience, okay? So we have our first sense, somebody name one. Smell, right? So you smell something, you're trying to learn in class, you smell something, okay, I smelled it, okay, went right through my brain. I've got it figured out, I can keep going. Another one. Hearing. I hear noises outside, okay, that's annoying, right? But I can still concentrate, it goes right on through. Taste. Right? I just tasted that funky thing. I know I can spit it out and I'll be done with it. I can still concentrate and keep on going. Touch, right? Somebody touched me and it bothered me and now I'm going to move on.
Which means
Proprioceptive, right? I know where I am in space. I don't need help with that. Vestibular, whatever. I'm good at balancing. No problem at all. What's our last one? Seeing, right? Oh, bright lights, big city. No worries, that was a little bit annoying, but I think I can handle it, right? What's left in our colander? Right? Our brain, empty, right? Ready for all kinds of good learning to take place, right? We can go to algebra, we can go to chemistry, right? Our brain is good, we've filtered all this stuff out, we're good, we can continue to learn. Well, when you have the brain of somebody who has autism, here's what happens, okay? Right? We smell something. Stuck, right? We see something, stuck. We hear something, stuck. We taste something, stuck, right? We sense where we are in space. It doesn't feel comfortable, stuck in my brain, okay? I can't tell where I am, and I'm feeling uncoordinated, stuck in my brain. Which one did I miss? Sound? Sight. Too bright, too many lights. I'm so overwhelmed. All right, now what's happening to our brain? Right, we're trying to filter really, really hard. Now I'm sitting in class and I'm trying to learn chemistry, but I still have all this stuff in my brain. Right? How much more difficult does that make learning? Even though you have the intellectual capabilities to learn, to function, to survive, to succeed, all of this stuff can't get out of your brain, okay? Because you haven't been able to filter it and you haven't been able to sort it out. And that's what being on the spectrum does, okay? We have a little video clip here that's much about this sensory overload idea that we're going to watch, and then I'll take some questions from you all. Maybe? Here we go. Ooh, we have sound?
Yeah, sure. Hold on. I'll rewind it, I don't know what sound is. I had a sub yesterday, they turned on the volume.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, sorry,
That's okay.
can't see what I'm doing from back here very well.
There you go. reasons that I love that is because you sense it all, right? There's the sound, there's the lights, there's the smells, right? That everything, and finally he closes his eyes, right? Covers his ears to try to limit all of that input that he's getting, right? And then falls and starts to rock, okay? Because that's a self-soothing type of behavior, like, I know I'm going to be okay, no, I'm going to be okay, right? Trying to talk themselves out of it. So, what kind of questions do you all have? We have a few more, obviously 10, 15 minutes here. I'd love to answer your questions. I know I've thrown you a lot of information, and if any of you are interested, I can certainly leave. I started a blog 52 days ago, actually, and dedicated it to my Tucker called 366 Days of Autism, where I'm in a blog every day for a year. About the different things that we have struggled with in his lifetime, and today I wrote about actually the vestibular sense, okay, and how he has troubles with coordination, so he breaks a lot of things, often, okay, and so every day I've been writing, right? So you're certainly welcome to follow that and learn some more about it.
Will you write that blog on the board for them?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Okay, what kind of questions do you have?
Broadcast.
Okay, so me and my mom kind of think that my little brother might have Alzheimer's.
Okay, sure.
And the only reason I think that is because he's so intelligent. He's like 3 years old.
Right.
Like he knows every single name to any dinosaur you could ever show him.
Right.
Like those huge names that I wouldn't be able to recognize. But like, if he's focused on something, there's no way that you're going to get out of it. Like no way. Like you can like
And
snap
that's,
at him.
yep, and that would be a huge difference, I would tell you, between, there are lots of children who, have ADHD and ADD, and sometimes there's a misdiagnosis because of the physical stuff that you notice, right, the constant movement.
And yeah.
But that's how I knew that Tucker,
He goes like this.
yeah, there might be some stuff going on there. One of the things about Tucker that I would tell you is that he, when he was 5, memorized the NCAA basketball chart, okay, like March Madness, with all teams, all 60, all the way in. And one day we were sitting in church and he was like, Mom, can you draw me some brackets? I'm like, oh, yes, I'll draw you brackets, whatever, right? And he recreated the chart, right? And he was like 5.
Cool.
So there's, we call them, it's actually called Island Savant, where they're so good at this one thing, but everything else, right, is just like, okay.
Well, and it's like to get himself to sleep, he has to have, it's called baby. It's like this little whale. It's so cute. And he has a blanket, and it's like this. And rocks like this. Like,
Yeah.
it's so hard to like to get himself to go to sleep. And
So what he's probably craving is obviously movement, but I wonder what would happen if you laid with him and held him super, super tight. Like,
he probably did.
Like bear hugging? I don't know. It might. That's what we used to have to do. Like, I can remember being black and blue with Tucker because I put him down for a nap and he would just, he still had so much in him and he would just like kind of beat the crap out of me, right? But then once he was out, he was out. So yeah, there's definitely probably some stuff going on.
So like kids have some of the signs of autism, like not have autism at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, we're all on the spectrum, right? How Tucker would say, well, we all have autism. Well, we kind of do, right? But the difference is, what I would tell you, the difference is can they function, right, without extra help? So for Tuck, I mean, we had to do some extra things at school, right? I mean, he's in classes with his peers. Many of them would never know. Many of them do know because I have taught him to advocate for himself. He actually did this presentation in front of his class last year and talked about the experience of having autism. But yeah, I mean, all of us have this stuff to a certain degree, right? But it's a matter of, does it get stuck in my brain? Or can it go through, right? It can still bug me, right? Whatever that noise is right now is bugging me a little bit. Okay. I don't know, what is that? Is that a washer? Yeah. Right? So that's bugging me a little bit, but I can still function, right? I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, you've got through, right? And that would be a big difference.
Okay, so like with like holding on to things and not letting go, like my sister like would really like when she like sees something she wants, she like won't stop mentioning that she wants it or won't stop trying to get it until she gets it.
Right.
Is that like the same?
It is, yeah, to a certain degree. How old is she?
She's like 11.
Oh, so she should be child development beyond that point, wouldn't you think? Yeah, I mean, that's very
Like
much
a lot
a
of stuff you
3-4-year-old
were
thing.
saying, like up there, And
You're
I was
like,
like, she has that too, she has that too.
yeah, very, very well could be. And the thing is, you know, with Tuck is that he would have never been identified 15 years ago, ever. Okay? But we're figuring out now that a lot of the kids who are naughty aren't actually being naughty. So, like, here's a great example. The groundedness, kids who run their hand down the hall when you're in line. Remember you're going to lunch and somebody had to run their line down the hall, their hand on the wall? You know what I'm talking about? Right? And the teacher was maybe like, get your hand off the wall, keep your hands to yourself, right? Everybody remember that moment? That kid was probably trying to find his groundedness or her groundedness, right? That they actually probably weren't being naughty, but that there was something within them that was like, I can't tell where I am in space, and if I touch that wall, I'm going to feel better, right? So I think that that's one of the big differences.
So can like Tucker like not go on airplanes or like trains or whatever?
No, we don't know. We don't know. I don't know how he would do it on an airplane. It's a little frightening to me. We took him to Colorado and took him up Pikes Peak, which is, of course, you know, if any of you have been up, and he had a very adverse reaction to, what do you call that? Height. Elevation, yeah. Very, very adverse reaction to the elevation. So, I don't know. I'd probably try to knock him out. I'd probably go bad mom and give him some NyQuil before we go so that he would be out.
So then is it kind of like, so when he plays football,
Is like the loud noises and like the coordination, is all of that like a problem or? Yeah.
Yeah, he struggles, and part of it is that, of course, our coaches, and I'm from Shell Rock, so I go to Waverly Shell Rock, our coaches, of course, want him playing football, but he struggles. So the first year he played, he was struggling, and finally I said to the coaches, I said, listen, this is so overwhelming for him. There are all these noises, all these sounds, all these bodies, all this stuff. I said, you have to say to him, Tucker, I want you to tackle number 57. That's what I want you to do. And then he was good. Once I talked to them about, you can't say, you know, here's the entire play. It's sort of like that puzzle, right? This person, nope, just tell him, right? He's just going to be a great computer engineer someday. This is my job. This is what I do. I'm the best at it. Okay? So very, very specific. It's a great question.
What you said about like naughty.
Yes.
Braylon is so naughty. Like I feel like he's being naughty.
Right.
But then again, like I don't know if that is really what he's doing.
Right. I don't know. There could be something else going on. Yeah, you have to read the blog because there may be a lot of things. I didn't give a share with her mom because there may be a lot of things in there where she's like, oh boy, yes.
Well, it's like I live at my house with my mom and my two brothers and my stepdad.
Okay.
But this is Braylon that lives with my dad. And
Oh,
my
okay.
stepmom
Okay,
and my
gotcha.
Sister.
Right. So you could share it with maybe your dad or your stepmom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. And if there is something going on, the thing is that you have to come to terms with it. And you have to figure it out right away because Tucker is so high functioning, but I have to believe he's so high functioning because when he was 4, I was like, there's something going on. And I was just talking to a friend of mine last night who her son has had significant issues, and she didn't start questioning until 3rd grade. Well, by the time they're in 3rd grade, you're beyond a lot of this kinds of stuff that will help.
So like so when I work at the pool, like I could hear like 7 or 8 different conversations, and like the people in the like lighthouse laughing and stuff like that, and I could like tune into all of it. But then like when I'm sitting like from me to her and she's like talking in a normal voice, I won't be able to like understand anything.
Yeah.
At all.
Yep. Right, exactly. And you're still able to function. And one of the reasons that I love to talk about that is that really none of us are that different than children or people on the spectrum. Okay? They just have a little bit stronger than we do. So if you really talk to somebody and get to know them, you'll be like, oh yeah, I understand that. I also don't like mashed potatoes. I also like to have my blankets tight on me. I also, right, that we're able to identify with those pieces and those parts of people.
Yeah,
it's
like,
really important.
Like if you want to have a conversation with me, you have to have eye contact with me,
Yeah.
Otherwise it's all mumble.
And that's another, that would be another example. Tucker, he won't have eye contact.
that Braylon one.
Yeah,
That's
he's
what me and my
off over
mom-
here.
or
Right,
mom.
and even when I take a picture, right, I would literally have to put my camera, I'll have to like, from, Tucker, look at me, right? He won't look at me until I do this. Tucker, look at me. And then finally, if I snap a picture right away, I'll get him. But I have more pictures with him going, right, than not. And part of that is that there's serious eye contact issues, which is a huge, huge indicator.
And
Huge
he will
indicator.
not think.
Yeah,
But
huge
you have to
indicator.
put his head, like, facing you
Yep.
to do it.
Yeah, and part of this actually, the eye contact thing that's very interesting to me, is obviously I do a lot of reading, and there's this book called The Reason I Jump, and it's written by, oh gosh, I think he was 13 years old, who has autism but very high functioning, and what he said, I actually had Tucker read this. I said, Tucker, is this the truth? And he was like, yep, that's exactly right, right? That this boy accurately describes, I don't look at you, this is crazy sauce, but awesome. I don't look at you because I'm looking at the words. So if any of you know anything about autism, many children, many people who have autism have this keen spatial awareness. Like they can understand, like they're great at geometry and math and logic and how things fit together and puzzles, right? And so this boy goes on to describe, I don't look at you because I'm looking at the words that you said so that I can make sense out of them. And if I look at you, then I'm not concentrating on the words anymore. So I read that, and I handed it to Tucker, and I said, is that true? He said, oh yeah, I spell out all the words, and then I look at them all, and I read them, and then I'm able to respond. And I'm like, that's crazy awesome, right? So now I don't give him a hard time about it anymore. If he needs to look, actually, if he's looking at me, I know he's not paying attention, which is weird. Totally the opposite.
Yeah, like behavior too, like do a lot of people with autism and this kind of thing like have like really fast, like they get really angry about something.
Oh.
But like even if you were just to say like the slightest thing that might upset them just a little, they just totally blow up.
Fly off the handle, just like that. Yeah, which is one of the reasons that you know, in like our house we don't ever yell, and it's not just because of the voice thing, but it's because he's so quick to respond, right? And take it to like the 10th degree where you're like, dude, I just asked you to put the milk away. Right? And some of that is that they are unable, and this is part of the interoceptive sense, they're still trying to figure out, there's some inability to regulate emotion. You know, whether that be sadness or happiness, like Tucker will just all of a sudden break into tears, and I'm like, dude, it's like, you're not having PMS right now, I know that, right? Like, you're not at that point in your life, and you'll never be. And you can't even be having sympathy, I don't know what, but all of a sudden he'll just roll into tears, like over the smallest, tiniest thing. And I can see it, right? And I'm like, well, no reason to cry. Here's, right, and then we kind of slow it down, because a lot of times what happens, I think they get themselves so amped up that oftentimes they'll just have to slow it down, take it thing by thing, right, and talk him and walk him through it.
Yeah, I can understand like the football stuff that could get to him because in Powerpuff, like the girls, we don't know what we're doing, so they color code our like plays. They're like, you just look at pink, and Cobra Pink goes, don't look at the whole play.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
We're not used to having attention.
Exactly. So I need it focused. I need something smaller.
Okay, like with my sister too, like the other day I said like she was writing this story or something.
Right.
And she put candy on it for some words. And the beginning of it, I was like, I've heard that before somewhere. Like, it's cool ending, but like I've heard the beginning somewhere before. She got like way mad at me. Like she like you're being so mean. Like she just totally.
Yeah, they're very, very sensitive. Many.
Yeah.
You know, one of my favorite things about Tucker is we actually refer to him as our tape recorder, because his language was slow to develop, which is another sign along with eye contact. He's so stinking smart that what he's figured out how to do is he memorizes everything that we say. And then he replays that in like situations. So he's not able to sort of come up with his own, which is why he sounds like me. Right? People are like, oh, he sounds so grown up. Well, yeah. And that's because of this. And he oftentimes, there's another good side, he is actually better friends with adults than he is with his peers. Has much better relationships with adults. And one of the saddest things, and I'll tell you this quick before I know we have to go, is that it's sad and wonderful at the same time. He went to see research.
Brief announcements.
When he was
Need to have quick.
It's okay.
Minor speech trials that are happening now. Make sure you get signed up if you're wanting to be a part of the speech contest this year.
When
Need
he was in
to
5th grade,
get signed up for that book club. You'll meet today 7th hour in Mr. Heron's room. Also, seniors will be meeting with Ms. Brungardt today. And Friday at 3:15 there's a girls'
Tucker, do you know
basketball team
people, are
meeting in
there
this
other
Hartman's
kids
room,
at your school
and also
who have
football
autism?
guys you will
He
be
was like,
meeting.
well, yeah, do you know about the
Well,
spectrum?
thank you.
The guy was like, yes, I know about the spectrum. And he said, well, yeah, there's some kids, they're not really like me. I'm kind of just like me, and so they're talking, and so he says, oh, okay. He said, well, I bet you have a ton of friends. You are so funny, and he is. Like, he would crack you up because he loves teenagers and he loves grown-ups, okay? Not so much kids his own age. And so he said, nope, I don't have many friends. And the researcher, said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's really surprising to me because you are so kind and nice and everything. And he said, oh, no, I have a lot of friends. My mom's friends are my friends. Matt's friends are my friends. My dad's friends are my friends. Coach Velke and Coach Eckenrod and Coach Leonard and Coach. My coaches are all my friends. My teachers are my friends. Lisa at Quickstar, she's my friend. She always talks to me, right? So he's going through this whole thing. He said, but I don't really have friends my own age because I hear them, right? And the researcher's like, you hear them? Well, yeah, I hear them make fun of me. They don't think that I can hear them. Like when I'm walking away from them and they say things that are actually kind of mean, I hear them. And it's really mean. And I don't like get invited to birthday parties and stuff, and I hear them and I know what they really say and I know what they really think about me. So I just decided to not let that hurt my feelings and be friends with grown-ups instead. Right? And like we got home and he went to play the Xbox and I went in the bathroom and sobbed. Right? Because I was just like, how do you I don't even know what to say to that, in the fact that in 5th grade you are so mature that you make that choice. I'm not even going to worry about kids my own age. I'm just going to be friends with the people who want to be my friend. And I thought a lot about how I'm 38 and it took me 35 years, right, to figure that out, and it took him 10. So, as a closing, just thinking about all of the people in our lives, high functioning or not, that they hear things. They're very, very well aware of what we say, how we look at them, how we behave, right? They know. And we can't hide it. And so, all of our actions certainly affect the way that people think, feel, and believe about themselves. So it's one of the reasons that we stay very positive in our house and we're always trying to be happy. Well, this person, maybe they have this going on, or maybe they had a bad day, or maybe this, right? So that Tucker learned some of those strategies because, it was a huge moment. It was a huge turning point. So anyway, that's all I have. I wish I had more time, but we don't.
Thank you so much.
It's all good.